Well, welcome everyone. This is an hour-long conversation on unleashing your philanthropy, and I am excited about this subject. It's one of my favorites. So I have a philosophy, and my philosophy is that people are inherently generous. I think they want to give. I would think they want to give more than they do now, but often they are torn. They don't know how to give more. They're not sure if they can give more. Can they afford to give more? They would like to give more, but they don't want to do so at the expense of disinheriting their kids or their family. And often they haven't taken the steps to include charitable giving in their estate plan to make sure that the big final gift at the end of their lives gets carried out. And so these are all topics that we're going to talk about today. So thank you for being here. It's really one of my favorite subjects. My name is Amy Jamrog. I am a chartered advisor in philanthropy, so a special designated around this very topic. And I come to you with 29 years as a financial advisor. So I want to set the stage for today. I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm also going to give you a little writing prompt. So just make sure you've got something to write with, because I think it'll be helpful for you to take a couple of notes regarding your own giving when we get to that section. So I want to talk to you about my client. I'm going to call her Grace. I have her permission to share her story. And it starts back in 2021. She had been my client for a number of years. And during 2021, which of course was COVID, there was so much need in the nonprofit community. And she's an extremely generous philanthropic woman in her 70s. But her giving during COVID started to become very reactive. So she started signing up for all of these monthly auto draft donations. She would then get end of year solicitations and feel like she also needed to give to organizations at the end of the year because she loved the causes that they were supporting. She loved their missions. Even if she was already giving to them monthly, when she got the end of the year solicitation, she felt obligated to give them another gift at the end of the year. And then she'd also panic when a natural disaster happened somewhere in the world, or an election happened that was not consistent with her values. And she would panic and she would just start giving more to more. So let's pivot to 2022. I had a conversation with her and I said, when we looked at her donations for the end of the year and added everything up, both she and I were surprised by how much she had given. It was reactive and it was a little, dare I say, haphazard, because it wasn't thought out. It was, and it wasn't based on a budget. She just gave, and then realized, ooh, I don't know if I can actually sustain this level of giving. And when we looked at her plan, she was correct. She could not sustain at that level of giving. So what we decided to do was what we called a donation downtime, to just pause her giving in January of 2022 and just step back and take a look at all of the places she was giving. Really get clear about all of these monthly donations that were automatically happening, the year-end gifts, the spontaneous gifts to organizations she had never given to before, but saw a sad commercial on TV and reacted to it. And when she really sat down to take a look at her giving and step back from it, what she realized was that she needed a plan. And so I'm going to share an email that she sent to me. And she said this: we took a little bit of time, right, to think about and plan for the upcoming year differently. And she said this: examining a process that I have been doing the same way for so long was at first a little unsettling. But I realized at times that my gift giving had become more obligatory than joyful generosity, and reactionary. So thank you for initiating the conversation about creating a vision for my giving. You always have an open and affirming way of approaching my financial matters, and I greatly appreciate you and your love for philanthropy. I love my new plan for giving. So we'll talk in a little bit about what her new plan became. But before I share that with you, here's your prompt. I want you to think about, if I were to ask you, what is your philanthropic philosophy? What would you say? And most people, when I ask this question of them, do not have an answer, or they would say, oh, great question. I don't even know how I would begin to define that. I give to so many different types of organizations. So take a moment as I'm talking and just start to write down all of the organizations that you give to. So first and foremost, the obvious ones, right? The big ones, your favorites, the ones you're most passionate about, the ones for whom you sit on the board, right? Start to write those down. But keep thinking, right? Keep thinking about the smaller ones, the reactionary ones, the walkathon, run-a-thon, things you do to support the neighborhood kids, right? All of the small check writing that you do, the credit card quick donations that you're doing online, the GoFundMes maybe that you're getting solicited for, some of which might maybe nonprofits, some might not be. You might be doing political giving, which is not deductible, but just think about all of the giving, what you would consider part of your giving plan. So when I did this exercise recently, because we periodically, go through this exercise just to double check, I started writing down, and you'll laugh when you hear these, right? Mine were Girl Scouts, Girls Incorporated, Girls on the Run, the Women's Fund. And so you start to see a theme, or hopefully you'll start to see a theme. So I want you to look at the gifts that you're giving, the places you are giving them to, and think about how much you give to each of these organizations. And so jot that down next to them too. And this is a perfect exercise to take away from today and just do some homework around this, because it can be very revealing. And so when you write down all of the organizations, and sometimes you even have to go back, to your tax documents for 2025 to look at all of them, because of many of them you may have even forgotten about. Then I want you to look at the dollar amounts that you give to each of these organizations and write all of that down as well. And then just step back for your donation downtime and take a look at that and see what you see. Is there a theme that starts to stand out for you? Is there a one-sentence philanthropic philosophy that you could state that would encompass your favorites, right? The ones you are most passionate about. So when you think about it, if you can define in one sentence what your philanthropic philosophy is in your donation downtime, you start to get really clear. And the clearer you get about your giving, why you give and to whom you give, it's going to make it easier for you to give powerfully to fewer organizations. So imagine if I'm going to give you this example. Let's say someone gives away $10,000 a year. And lo and behold, it's to 34 different organizations, right? From the big gifts down to a whole bunch of $25 checks to a whole bunch of miscellaneous organizations. And I say miscellaneous because for some people, they're not the important ones, right? The big checks are the important ones, but the smaller ones may not be as significant for you, may not be as meaningful for you, may just be reactionary, or I've always given to that, so I just keep giving to that without giving a lot of thought to it. So as we're going through this process, I want you to think about who you give to and why. For me, we have worked on this for many, many years, and this is our philanthropic philosophy, is that we give to organizations that support, grow, and encourage women and children as leaders. So when you hear Girl Scouts, Girls Inc., Girls on the Run, the Women's Fund, well, there's my theme, right? So we give to organizations that grow, support, and encourage women and children as leaders. That's very specific. And it's very specific. And when I hear that statement, it really lights me up. That's where we give personally. My partner and I give to organizations under that philosophy on the personal basis. But it's also the same philosophy for our business. And our office gives to organizations that fall into those same categories. Why do we do this? And why am I encouraging you to do this today? Because the clearer you are about your giving, not only can you look at the list and say, ooh, I wonder if instead of giving 10,000 to 34 organizations, like what if I gave $3,500 to my favorite 3? Like more to fewer. Could that be more impactful? And when you start to look at your giving, and this is what my client Grace started to realize, is she would say, do you think $25 really makes a difference? I would say a whole bunch of $25 do make a difference for an organization, but does it make a difference for her? And she didn't feel like these little donations that she was making were significant enough to make a difference versus bundling them up into a larger number and giving to fewer organizations. So I just want you to start to think about that. And why is this so helpful? First and foremost, if you have a philosophy and you are clear about it, and you can give to fewer organizations with bigger donations, it becomes more exciting for you, and it really becomes more exciting for the organization because it does mean bigger impact. When you can be clear about your giving and you can say to an organization, I'm giving you this year, this bigger donation this year, and here is why. It helps the organization also plan, especially if you can tell them in January what your plan is for the year and maybe even give to them earlier in the year. We're going to talk about budgeting for your philanthropy in a moment. But when you have a philosophy and you're really clear about it and you can kind of stand firmly and proudly in your philanthropic philosophy, it also helps you proudly say no thank you, powerfully say no thank you to other organizations that might solicit you, but who might not be a fit for your philosophy. So I say this because I had an organization who approached me, a great organization, a heart association related cause. They approached me for a year-end solicitation, and I called them back and I said, thank you for thinking of me. I think your organization's mission is excellent. It just doesn't happen to be in alignment with our philanthropic philosophy, which is that we give to organizations that support, encourage, and grow women and children as leaders. And the woman stopped and she said, say that again? And I said, well, our philanthropic philosophy is, and before I could even say the sentence, she said, you have a philanthropic philosophy? She goes, how wonderful is that? Then I said the sentence again, and she said, I'm going to write that down. She said, I love this. I need to do this for myself. And she said, I totally understand that you would be a no thank you for our organization, but I really appreciate your sharing your philosophy with me. Right? So do not underestimate the power of being really clear about your philanthropy and standing in that powerfully, because you can be a polite no thank you, and people for the most part understand that. So we're going to talk about how to give. How do you unleash your philanthropy in a way that is powerful, that is strategic, and that is the best tax benefit for you, not to mention, of course, the impact that you're having on the organization. So what I can tell you is that giving in your lifetime, there's particular strategies for that. And then giving at your death, if you want to have legacy, if you want to build in your estate plan, additional philanthropic giving, we're going to talk about that today too. And I'll tell you, we see this all the time, that people have really generous plans for their giving all through their lifetime. And then when they pass away, there is zero instruction for the family, right? How often do you see an obituary that says, and please give to an organization of your choice in honor of my dad, right? That doesn't give anyone instruction, nor does it speak to the philanthropic philosophy that you've had for your entire lifetime of giving. So if you can get really clear today on your philosophy, and if you can share that with your kids, with your family, with whomever's going to be in charge of your estate, and get your estate documents really clear, then someone's going to be able to fulfill on that final great gift from you at your passing, which for most people is the biggest gift they've ever given. So we'll talk about that as well. All right, so let's talk about giving in your lifetime, and then we'll talk secondly about giving after death. So when you think about how you give, and I often ask this of clients, tell me how you do your charitable giving. And they say, well, what do you mean? How do I do it? I said, like, physically, how do you give money? And almost all the time we hear, well, I just write checks, or I go online and I just give. I give from my checking account. And what I would say to that is, if you are a check writing philanthropist, today's the day, hopefully you're going to stop doing that, because giving with your cash is the least effective way to give, right? That is the money you've already paid taxes on. And it's just sitting, it's your most valuable money for your own spending. It is not the most valuable money necessarily for your giving. And so I want you to start to think about different ways that you could give. And the first place to look is highly appreciated stocks or mutual funds, anything in an investment account, not necessarily your IRA or your 401k, right? We're going to talk about retirement account second, but in any investment account that you have, joint account, individual account, stock options that you might have from your company, the gift of highly appreciated funds has a double tax benefit for you. So let's just pick NVIDIA, for example. A lot of people have very highly appreciated NVIDIA stock right now. So let's just pretend that you bought NVIDIA for $1,000 and it is now worth $2,000. And you were going to give a charitable gift to an organization worth $2,000. Well, you could do your old-fashioned check writing, but giving them a gift of $2,000 from money you've already paid taxes on, you'll be able to deduct that as a charitable donation. However, look instead at your NVIDIA stock that is highly appreciated. You can take $2,000 worth of your stock and donate that money. And when you do, not only do you get the tax deduction for donating a $2,000 value stock gift, but you're also not going to pay capital gains on the $1,000 of growth that you've had. And it's because you're gifting it to the organization. You are not selling it first. And when you gift it to the organization, you get the tax deduction. You do not pay the capital gain, but the organization sells the stock when they receive it, and they don't pay taxes because they're a nonprofit. So you start to see where the gift of highly appreciated stock gives you a double tax benefit, the deduction itself and not having to pay capital gains. If you have a company appreciated stock, so you work for IBM and your company offers you stock as a part of your compensation each year. They offer you stock at a particular price. It grows over time. Now you've got some highly appreciated stock in your portfolio, and you may be reluctant to sell it, as many people are, because they don't want to pay the taxes on it. This is a great gift to give charitably. And most organizations are structured and set up to be able to receive a gift of stock or mutual funds and sell it on their side, but you don't sell it on your side. So that alone, instead of check writing, but just giving the gift of an appreciated holding in your portfolio, can make a huge difference for you, right? That could have a 20 to 30% difference in the amount of money you're able to give away because you're not incurring the tax to sell it first. Now, let's talk about retirement accounts. If you are over the age of 70 and a half, a very powerful way to give is directly from your IRA. So instead of taking money out of your IRA, paying taxes on it, like your required distribution every year, right? You take your RMD, you pay the taxes, now you have the cash, and now you're writing checks to do your donations. Instead of taking that money, taking receipt of that money and paying taxes on it, instead, you can gift directly from your IRA. And you can gift up to $111,000 per year in 2026. So this is a huge opportunity. And when you give directly from the IRA, you don't get the tax deduction, but it is not considered ordinary income to you to give directly to the organization. There's a very particular way you have to do it. It has to go from the IRA directly to the institution. It cannot pass through you unless you get a check made out to the organization that you hand over to them. That's okay. We don't want the money, though, to pass through you directly. So a gift from your IRA, if you're over age 70 and a half, you can give up to $111,000. Here's another idea and something that many people maybe have heard of, but don't really understand how it works. And that is to establish a donor-advised fund. Now, a donor-advised fund is a bucket of money that you can fill. It's an empty bucket that you can fill, and it becomes the bucket from which you give away charitably. So here's how it works. You establish a donor advised fund. You open up this account, and then you donate into it highly appreciated stock or mutual funds. So just as we were talking about before, but instead of giving directly to the organization, you're going to give into a donor advised fund, and this becomes your future giving account. The beauty of the donor advised fund is this. Let's just say, okay, perfect scenario. You give away $10,000 per year, and you've planned to give that, every year moving forward. But this is the year before you retire. This is a year you still have substantial income. You might have bonuses. You're really in a high tax bracket this year. So this is the year that you might want to pre-think and pre-fund your charitable giving. And by that, I mean, let's look at your company stock. Let's look at your appreciated holdings in your portfolio. Maybe this is the year that you put into your donor advised fund $50,000, which would be 5 years of future gifts. But this is the year you're in the highest tax bracket, right? Next year you're retiring. Let's look at years where your tax situation is much higher than normal. and maybe pre-fund into the donor advised fund. And here's why. You take some highly appreciated stock, you put it into your donor advised fund, $50,000. That's the year you get a $50,000 charitable contribution. So a significant contribution in a year where it makes the most significance to your tax picture. Now moving forward, you have a bucket with $50,000 in it. When you put that appreciated stock into it, you did not sell the stock. So again, that double whammy of a tax benefit for you. The stock goes in, it funds your account, and now you have this bucket of $50,000. Now let's look forward to 2026. You've retired, your income is down, your tax bracket's significantly lower. You don't really need the deduction the way that you did the year before. But now you've got 50 grand. And from that bucket, you can now continue to give your 10,000s each year for the next 5 years. You don't get the deduction for giving it later. You got it for funding the account, not for granting money out of the account. But it doesn't matter because you got the deduction in the year when it was most important to you. So a donor advised fund is a great place to just harvest a bunch of very highly appreciated stock. Like right now, for example, when the market is so high and you look at your account and you've got some pretty significant capital gains, this is where you talk to your financial advisor to say, kind of thinking about pre-funding a donor advised fund and starting to put a bunch of my future contributions into the bucket now. Can you look at my portfolio and choose the most expensive holdings I have, the ones with the biggest capital gains, and let's find a plan to pick the most expensive ones and use those for the donation. Very strategic and helps you really start to think upfront about your giving. That's for continuing your donations over the next 5, 10, 20 years. We do this when someone's selling a business. So we're working on this with a client right now. They're selling their business for $20 million. At the time of sale, we're going to put $1 million of highly appreciated company stock into a donor advised fund. So it's the year they're selling their company, big tax problem. It's also going to be the year that they're going to give a $1 million charitable contribution into a donor advised fund. Now, guess what? They've sold the company, they're retired. There's $1 million in that account. That's going to be their giving for the rest of their lives and probably for their kids also. But they got the deduction in the year when it made the biggest difference. So donor advised fund can really be a great strategy. Talk to your advisor or your CPA about this because a lot of people don't know about it and it could really benefit you. And this is the time of the year to be thinking about it. December 31st, you've got to set it up early enough to be able to fund it in time to get the deduction for this tax year. And the market is really good right now, right? We're not as motivated to do this when the market's down and we don't really have capital gains. But when you've got big gains and some big stock, especially the big tech stocks, now's the time to really be thinking about this. But maybe you have an organization you absolutely love and you are thinking about doing something bigger for them. So here's where it also makes sense to think about stockpiling your gifts to that organization in advance and maybe pre-funding directly to an organization. So pick your favorite organization. Let's pretend that you are going to give them $10,000 a year for their capital campaign to the tune of $50,000. Maybe they could really use that money now, right? Maybe you're thinking, geez, I've got these highly appreciated stocks in my portfolio. I hear now's a good time to really be thinking about this. I would love to accelerate my gift and say to the organization, I know I was going to give you $10,000 a year for the next 5 years. I know you could use it now. I'm going to give you my next 5 years of gifts today. And I'm going to transfer highly appreciated stock over to you. But just know that these are my gifts for the next 5 years. I'm just going to accelerate and give them to you now, especially if this is a year in which your taxes are high and you could really use the deduction for the next 5 years now. The organization benefits because they get your gift now instead of portioned out over the next 5 years. So just think about, right? This all comes back to your strategy. It all comes back to your philosophy about the organizations that you love the most and how can you make the biggest impact on them perhaps in this year. And then really think about how this fits into your tax strategy because your accountant can help you think about this, right? We often say, this might be the year for a big donor advised fund. I'm thinking 50 to 100,000 should go into that fund, but let's check with your CPA first. And so we send that question over to the accountant to say, how much can they give where it still make a difference in their taxes? What would you recommend specifically from the tax side, knowing that this is what we're trying to accomplish on the giving side? So it's a real coordinated effort between us, the CPA, and the client. All right, that's a lot of information. So let me just pause for a second. If anybody has any questions, does anyone, I'll check the chat, but if anybody has any questions that you want to put in the chat, feel free, and I can jump in and answer some questions for you now, or we can wait until the end when you've got all of this information and we can kind of pull it together for you. Nothing yet. Okay. Let me see. Oh, here we go. Can you give to a charity to avoid your RMD for the year? Yes, you can. So let's just say your RMD, you have to take $20,000 out of your IRA, Danny, and taking that money out, you're required to take it out, but can you give it charitably? Yes, you can. So that's a great thing. Again, I defer to the CPAs on this call for this question, but you can use the RMD, and instead of taking it as taxable income, you can give it as a gift. Great question. Anybody else? Yep. Can you explain how the tax law is changing with the deductibility of charitable donations for itemizers in 2025 versus 2026 and how this relates to the benefit of donor advised funds? Super technical answer to a really important question. And what I would say is for this particular one, it's so specific to the client, but for most people, 2025 is going to be the better donation than 2026. There are some phase outs that are happening. There's a certain percent of your adjusted gross income that the donation has to meet for it to be deductible. And so as you can imagine, the IRS has created this new rule that it's part of the OBBA, the One Big Beautiful Bill. It is complicated. And so I would just say, if you are thinking about doing something bigger in 2025 versus 2026, there may be some incentive to do that. And I would defer to your CPA to have that conversation because it does make a difference whether it's given outright or given to a donor advised fund. I will make this distinction, though, that's really important. I wish this was not the case, but the IRS still has kept the same rule for a long time. You can give directly from your IRA to charity. It's called a QCD, a qualified charitable deduction, but you cannot give directly from your IRA into a donor advised fund. So anything that you're going to use to fund your donor advised fund is going to come from your non-IRA account. And then any gifts, I would say big gifts that are going to your favorite organizations should come directly from the IRA to the organization itself. So Doug, I don't want to not answer your question, but because the answer is so technical for the change from 25 to 26, I always say defer to your CPA on that one. All right, so let's talk about gifts after your lifetime, right? So bequests. When we're thinking about organizations that you love, organizations you are passionate about and have given to for a long time, have you included them in your estate planning? Not just your intention, but there are a couple more steps you have to take to make the gift happen at your passing. So we'll talk about that in a couple of different areas. So the first is naming a charitable organization in your will. So your estate planning documents could include a will, a trust, and then you have your accounts. And what I can tell you is you can say in your will that in the end, when we're settling the will, I would like to give 10% of my net worth to charity. And you can specify that in a will. The problem with that is that the most efficient dollars are not being specified in the will. And there are certain kinds of gifts that should come from certain types of accounts that will make a bigger difference in your estate plan than others. So here's how it works. Your IRA 401k, 403b, when we roll it all up in the end, your qualified retirement money, which is the pre-tax dollars that you have in your account when you pass away. That money, and this is sometimes a surprise to people, that money, right, when you die and you leave it to a spouse, it's a rollover. It's a spousal rollover, and it goes to your spouse tax-free until your spouse starts to use that money. But when you give your IRA to your kids or nieces and nephews or any people, that is taxable to them. And it's taxable to them, and they have to take that money out over a 10-year period. So let's just say my grandmother dies and she leaves me $100,000 IRA. I'm the sole beneficiary of it. It's a wonderful gift, but of all of the things that she has when she dies, it's the worst gift to inherit besides nothing because it is so taxable. So if she left me $100,000, let's use an even bigger number, a $500,000 IRA, right? You wouldn't say no thank you to it. However, when you receive a $500,000 IRA and you are the beneficiary and you have to take that money out over a 10-year period, right? That's $50,000 if you do it evenly. You don't have to, but it has to come out in 10 years. That's $50,000 each year that's coming to my household as taxable income on top of my taxable income. So for some people, receiving the gift of an IRA, which is taxable, can be putting them in a higher tax bracket. It can make all of their household income move up into the next tax bracket. It could come at a time when, let's say, a couple is applying for financial aid for their kids for college, and now this new gift can disqualify them for financial aid. Like, there's some factors you really have to consider when you're thinking about naming beneficiaries on an IRA. We could have an entire webinar on beneficiary arrangements. But just know that when a person receives an IRA, it is totally taxable. However, when a nonprofit receives a gift from an IRA, it is totally not taxable. So when you're thinking about your bequests and you're thinking in the end, how does all of this money get divvied up among my kids, and I want to include my charitable giving, it should come, for the most part, from the IRA. So if you've got home equity that's going to your kids, that typically not taxable. You've got an investment portfolio with big capital gains in it. Typically on your death, your kids get a step up in basis, which means your $500,000 portfolio that grew to $1 million, if you were to cash it in your lifetime, you'd have to pay tax, capital gains tax on $500,000. But typically, when your kids inherit that, they get a step up in basis on the day that you die. So your $500,000 investment, which grew to $1 million, that in your lifetime you would have had to pay taxes on, when the kids receive it on the day of your death, if the account's worth $1 million, that's where they start. That's the new watermark. So they receive that money not taxable. So home equity, typically not taxable. Step up in basis types of brokerage accounts, not taxable. Life insurance, not taxable. IRAs, totally taxable. So I want you to step back and look at the assets that you have and not just say in a will and give 10% of something I have to charity, but instead it's really important that you designate on your IRA account itself. You have to fill out a form and say, upon my death, please leave $100,000 or 10% of my IRA to these organizations. When you stipulate it directly from the IRA, it will go directly to the organizations from the account that is the most taxable, and it will leave the other types of accounts, home equity, brokerage accounts with a step up, life insurance, the not taxable money will go to your families. So this goes back to this question about, I really would love to give more at my passing, but not at the risk of disinheriting my kids. Well, guess what? If your kids are successful and they're in high tax brackets, the gift, I'm putting in air quotes, the gift of an IRA could be a very expensive gift to people, but a really wonderful gift to give to nonprofits. So we see people redoing their beneficiary designations in their estate plan to say, home equity, 50-50 to my kids. Brokerage account, 50-50 to my kids. Life insurance, 50-50 to my kids. IRA, 100% to all my favorite charities. So keep in mind that there's strategic ways to give in your lifetime, but there are equally strategic ways to give when you pass. That you've got to take that extra effort to make sure that you're designating the right beneficiary on the right type of account to make sure that the most expensive tax account is going to the entity that doesn't pay any taxes. So that's a big one. And it really, it's a piece of paper. We see this so frequently where people are, they have the right intentions and their beneficiaries are backwards. And so it's really just a matter of switching the beneficiary from one type of account to the other type of account to make sure the tax-free money goes to the kids, the less taxable money goes to the kids, but the big tax money goes to the charitable organization. So this goes to another question that people often ask about, which is this. And we ask this of our clients all the time. I've got clients on this call, you'll know what I'm about to say, which is when we talk about beneficiary designations, when we meet with a new client, almost always, when I say, and who in the end, no matter what is left over, who gets this money? And almost always the answer is the kids. And I'll ask this question. Do the kids need to be the 100% beneficiary of your money? Or would you be willing to talk about a strategy where 90% would go to your kids and 10% could go to charity, because I know you're philanthropic, without hurting your kids? Well, of course, right? There's nobody who says no thank you, right? If there's a way for someone to give charitably without disinheriting their kids, everyone's interested in knowing about that. And this is where we talk about your kids are successful. They're in higher tax brackets than you. You've got an IRA that's heavily taxed to them at your passing. If we give to charity, your estate gets a deduction, your kids get the better assets. And in the end, we can show the math where it actually turns out that the kids end up with the same, if not more money, and the organizations get what you intended for them to get from the right account and a charitable deduction. So it probably sounds complicated as I'm explaining it, but it's quite a simple solution to just have someone do a beneficiary audit of your plan and make sure that the right people are attached to the right assets and the right organizations are attached to the taxable assets. And that could make a real big difference in the way that you give. The other thing to just consider, and this is a little bit of an aside, but we see this often where picture your kids or your beneficiaries. It could be nieces and nephews. It could be any people that you love. They might not all be in the same tax picture. So I've used this example before where we had a client, 2 kids, son is in a nonprofit, daughter is an orthopedic surgeon. She's in the highest tax bracket, he's in the lowest tax bracket. And right now they're giving 50-50 beneficiary across the board of all of the different types of accounts they have. What they didn't realize is when we did the math to show them how much their son would get in a low tax bracket and how much their daughter would pay in taxes at a high tax bracket because of the types of accounts that they were giving the kids evenly, all we had to do was change the beneficiaries to take the taxable IRA after charitable giving and give it to the son in the low tax bracket, minimal taxes he would have to pay versus maximum taxes the daughter would have to pay at her tax bracket, and give her the home equity. So we were able to reconfigure the beneficiaries so that after taxes, both kids in very different tax brackets ended up with an equitable split of the money and saved about $150,000 in taxes. So when parents say we like to leave everything equally to our kids, they often don't realize that each account, the type of account it is, does not equally go to the kids. Initially, 50-50 looks like 50-50, but when you subtract out the taxes, it often is not 50-50, and they just don't know that. So again, beneficiary audit might be some homework that you take from this call today, because we often see where adjustments could be made to benefit everybody, not just the kids, but the organizations that you care about too. And lastly, I just want to talk about, does your family know about your giving? Do they know not just about the giving in your lifetime, but do they know about bequests that you like to leave after the fact? And having this kind of candid conversation with them can be really powerful, right? As opposed to, please leave a charitable donation to the organization of your choice in honor of my dad, could be much more specifically, right? Please leave a charitable donation to the following 2 organizations, which were my dad's favorite charities in his lifetime and not which he served the boards. But you can tell a wonderful story, and you're more apt to see people take action when it's something that was meaningful to the deceased person. So talk to your kids about this. The other thing that we've seen really compelling for families is when parents or elderly parents, maybe even the grandparents, set up a donor advised fund, involve the family, right? Take your highly appreciated stock, put it into that bucket, build the bucket up to be something really substantial for your family. And now moving forward, when you start to grant money out of that account to different organizations, ask your grandkids. Maybe in fourth quarter around Thanksgiving, it would be a wonderful time of the year to talk to the grandkids and say, you can each give $1,000 to an organization of your choosing. Who would you choose? It opens up a very different kind of conversation with younger people or your adult children to build that philanthropic conversation, to have them understand your own philanthropic philosophy. Maybe you even take it a step further, and over Thanksgiving this year, you have a family conversation called, what is the Jones family philanthropic philosophy? Like, that would be such an interesting conversation to have with 3 generations of people. Get everybody to weigh in, like, what do we as a family stand for? What is our mission, and what do we want to support? And that can be really powerful. Then you can use your donor advised fund to support those organizations and involve the family. So let's come back to my client Grace. And let's talk about now we've really made some progress. It's taken a couple of years to change some old habits, but here we are 2025. And so this is what her philanthropic philosophy and so her philanthropic philosophy is to 2 very specific causes. Food insecurity is one, and water safety globally is another. So those are her 2. It took her some time to really narrow it down to those 2. But what happened when she did, she saw that her biggest gifts went there. All the little ancillary ones were going to organizations that weren't consistent with her new philosophy. And this is someone in her late 70s, right, who's developing this. So it is never too late to think about doing this. So here she is. She's got a philosophy. She's feeling confident about it. We now look at her portfolio, her non-retirement portfolio, and we make a big donation into the donor advised fund in January of every year. We're actually doing it right now because the market is so high. We're putting her 2026 giving into the donor advised fund right now just to get it ready for January. Now she has access to this donor advised fund. She logs into the portal, and then she can go in and she can start to add all of the small gifts that she still loves to give to organizations consistent with her philosophy are all going to come from that donor advised fund. Big donations are now going directly from her IRA to the organization. So we do that QCD, that qualified charitable deduction from the IRA for her big gifts. So we know those are pre-planned. The organizations get all of them in January, which they appreciate because they can plan with that money throughout the course of the year. The little gifts, the smaller gifts, are coming from her donor advised fund, but there's a budget. What we put in is what she spends. There's no more haphazard giving. There's no more random giving on the weekends because she saw a commercial that pulled at her heartstrings. She's got a philosophy. She's got a budget for her giving. We know what comes out of the IRA. We know what she can spend from the donor advised fund. And when it's spent, it's spent. And then we replenish it again the following year. All of those automatic monthly donations that were so systematized that some of which she forgot she was even giving, all have been canceled. It took her a whole year to make sure that she wasn't missing any of them, but all those automatic credit card charges, all those automatic checking account deductions, all have been eliminated. Many of them canceled because they're not consistent with her philosophy. And now we've rolled it up so that fewer organizations consistent with her philosophy get bigger donations each year from the most strategic accounts. It has saved her in taxes. It has saved her some stress. And she just feels so much more deliberate, so much more thoughtful about her giving. And then we always leave a little bit in the donor advised fund for spontaneity, right? Something that might come up throughout the course of the year, an organization she learns about that she'd love to support. So there's still some room for some spontaneity, but it's much more deliberate, it's much more thoughtful, and it fits into her long-term financial plan. So if she continues giving at this level, her plan works fine for the rest of her life. And her donor advised fund will have money left over in it so that her family can continue her giving philosophy past her lifetime. Her IRA will be given, donations will be given from her IRA at her passing to the organizations that she loves. This is crystal clear to her kids. They know that they're not the 100% beneficiary of the IRA, but they're going to get the house, the non-retirement account, and the life insurance. And when you add that up, not taxable, it is significant for her kids. They love that mom is going to give the IRA to charity. So these are the kinds of things that I want you to think about when it comes to your own philanthropic philosophy, right? You might not have one, but maybe over the course of this hour, you're starting to think of what that could be. Really start to audit the different giving that you have for the different organizations, and are these still all meaningful organizations to you versus obligatory? And does it make sense to stop some of those? And then once you're clear about your philosophy, now let's look at your financial plan to see how much can you give, and from the most strategic places where that giving could be coming from. So I will pause here and open up for questions. Oh, Carrie, thank you. In the chat, Carrie just posted that donor advised funds, just to be clear, when you make the donation, let's say of your highly appreciated stock, and it goes into that account, that stock gets sold, right? You don't sell it, the fund itself sells it, but then your money gets reinvested. So Carrie's point was for me to mention that a donor advised fund is actually invested and can earn over time. So if you were going to do a big gift this year for the next 5 years worth of giving, it's not just sitting in cash. It actually gets invested. You choose the allocation. You can choose to be aggressive with that investment and really try to grow it over time. You can choose to be more conservative if you know you're going to spend it sooner. You can choose to be socially responsible with it. Many of the donor advised funds like Fidelity is a big one. Fidelity Charitable, for example, has an ESG, socially responsible option for your giving. There's so many choices. But when you set up these donor advised funds, whether you do it at a big institution like a Fidelity or a Vanguard, or you go to your local community foundation, which we're a big proponent of for local giving, the money does get invested and it does grow over time. So that's excellent. Thanks, Carrie, for that. Jillian just asked if this recording is going to be shared with you. Yes, next week it'll be live on our website, and we'll send it out in an email to all the participants. So if you wanted to share it or watch it with somebody else again, yep, it will be recorded. Any other questions? Or if anybody wants to unmute and just ask a question and have a conversation with me, this is a good time to use the resource you've got right here for somebody who loves this subject and does a lot of work in it. Okay, so I'm going to just pause here and oh, Diane, yes. You want to unmute Diane? Did we find Diane? Allow Diane to talk. Diane, if you unmute, you can ask your question.
I actually wasn't going to ask a question. I was just playing with it, but I would like to say excellent job.
Oh, thank you.
Very good. It makes me feel good about what I've done because I have defined my giving where I appreciate the mission and the leadership. It made me realize that most of my giving is local. I would say almost all of my giving is local. Yep. And it does tend toward women and girls. And I hadn't really thought about that before. But so thank you very much, because it's just made me think about it. And the only thing I have questions about is I've never thought about is the whatever it was that you just, it's gone from my mind, but the part that will be taxable to my kids. So yes. I really have to look at that. I don't know how much it is, and I've never thought about that, but I will. So thank you.
You are so welcome. And this is the thing, right? Where you've got all the right intentions, you've got a philosophy, you give locally, right? It's this one final piece that makes all the difference for the right money to go to the right people versus the taxable money to go to the right organization.
It's very helpful. I had a husband who believed that it was okay to pay taxes because we were lucky to be able to. So I have to put that into my thinking as well. Thank you.
No, you're so welcome. And I would say this to that philosophy, which is, yes, I mean, if you have to pay a lot in taxes, it means you're successful, right? We should be grateful for that. But here's another way to look at it, right? You have 4 kids. If you don't do the right strategic planning, when you die, you actually have 5 kids, your 4 daughters, and the IRS is the 5th. And the IRS ends up getting a 20% of the money if this beneficiary change is not made. And so why add an extra child to the mix if you don't need to, with just a very simple change in the beneficiary designations on the right accounts? So I think that's a great statement. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
You're welcome. A couple other questions. How might you donate highly appreciated stock to a church? So typically a church can receive it. If your church can receive it, then they would have an account where I'm using Fidelity as the example, Fidelity Vanguard. You would go onto your Fidelity account and you'd give the church's account number and routing number, and the institution would be able to transfer the gift of stock to the church and they could sell it. If an organization does not accept highly appreciated stock or funds, use a donor advised fund. Same outcome. You take your appreciated stock or funds, put it into your donor advised fund, and then you grant the donation from your fund right to the church. So they'll get the gift of cash, but you gave the right gift into the fund to have that double tax benefit for yourself. Jennifer just asked, where did her question just go? Do I have an easy reference page that shows the best and worst for kids and charities? Jennifer, do you mind unmuting just so I understand your question?
Hi,
Hello.
Amy. Can you hear me
Hi.
now?
I sure
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. What I mean is, you were talking about how for appreciated stock, it's best to go into a DAF, how home equity is best to go to X, how an IRA is best to go to charities. So it would be nice if we could kind of see at the top the tax piece and the beneficiary piece. Now I'm using the word beneficiary loosely, meaning the charity or the kids, but just to kind of see, is there a decision-making tree that we could put in front of a client to help them see which is the best and why? I mean, obviously this could be a compliance related issue, but I was just wondering if you'd seen anything like what you were describing so that you could kind of help a client pick and choose which box best met their needs.
No is the answer. I don't have something like that, though it would be a great piece to have as a visual to just, what I just explained, right? To have a piece that a client could see would be super helpful. Let us do some digging on our side, and if we come up with something, I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great question. Okay, making sure I didn't miss anybody. Any other questions? Anybody else want to unmute and have any comment, anything you've done with your own giving that would be great for our audience to hear? Okay, then we are going to conclude, but I would love for you to take away as a homework assignment 2 things. One is to work on your philanthropic philosophy so you can get that down into a clear 1-sentence statement. And the other is to do a beneficiary audit. Whether you do that yourself and just double check everything or ask a professional to help you, I think it could make all the difference. As Diane was just saying, you think you've got it all buttoned up, but this is the one piece that without it, everything is going to go the way it goes in terms of beneficiaries, and it might not be the most effective for your family or for the organizations that you love. So 2 homework assignments for you. We will send this recording out, and then it'll be available on our website next week as well. Thank you for your attendance. Really great to talk to you about this subject, and we'll be in touch with our series for next year once we have those subjects ready to go. Thanks, everybody.